everybody. I'm excited to be with you this year, to be speaking with you and visiting with you and getting to know you. It's been a whole year since we've been to the Missouri area, so I always look forward to the time spent here with family and with you all. To remain faithful to Christ, you only have to endure. Now, that may seem like a vast oversimplification that you just need to endure and bear with it, but it's actually true for most different aspects of life. If you're trying to learn an instrument, you're trying to play a sport, or if you're trying to get another degree of education, you're going to face hard times. You're going to face challenges and difficulties. You might have a bad day at work, at school, have a bad practice, or even a bad game, a bad season. But it's those people who decide that they're going to stick with it, despite the failures, despite the hard times and the trials, that are going to end up succeeding. And the same is especially true for Christianity, where Christ has already won the victory for us. All we have to do is to endure the life and go through the life and persevere in the life that He has given to us. Now, how many of you have seen the movie Rocky? Okay, there's a couple. I mean, it's a fairly classic movie, and it's one of my favorites. It has the theme of perseverance in it, especially the first one. So, as you know, Rocky is this nobody from Philadelphia who is a fighter, not that good, but he is still selected to fight the heavyweight champion of the world, Apollo Creed. And whenever he does so, most people are expecting him to lose in 2, maybe 3 rounds at most is all he's expected to last. And so Rocky's goal is not to win the fight, but rather to go the distance. And for him, that means that he's going to surpass people's expectations, that he's going to put up a real fight against this guy. And he ends up lasting not 2 or 3 rounds. He ends up going all 15 rounds in that boxing match. And the most significant moment is in round 14, whenever both fighters look like their faces are balloons. Their faces are so swollen because of them hitting each other so much that Rocky can barely see out of his eye. And they're barely able to hit each other. But Apollo does get one good hit on Rocky and knocks him to the ground. And Apollo's, over there in his corner. He's like, I finally did it. I finally beat this guy. Only then he turns around and he sees Rocky stand up ready to fight him again. And it's at that point you can see in his face that he is utterly defeated. That even though, while Apollo didn't necessarily lose the fight on paper, you saw that Rocky won because he had taken something from Apollo at that moment. And that's the victory that he achieved at that moment. He had gotten his goal of going the distance. And that's what we need to do today. Is our lesson this morning is going to be on endurance in the Christian life and how we can do so. And I want you to get 2 things from this lesson. One is that I want you to be encouraged. I hope that you come away from this excited, wanting to renew your life and your efforts toward being a Christian and wanting to live a life that's dedicated to Christ. But the second thing I want is that I hope it spurs you to action. That you don't just come away from this thinking that was nice and then you go about your day, but that you actually implement and you change things about your life because you find new endurance. And so often it's easy for us to put Christianity by the wayside when things get hard, when life gets difficult, because we're busy. We have things going on in our lives. We have hardships. And so we put our devotion to Christ, our devotion to Jesus, to the side. And I hope that this lesson will invigorate you, that you will continue to take steps forward in this area where you might have been discouraged in the past. And so our lesson this morning is going to be primarily based out of Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. And this is a letter written to a group of Christians that are facing a lot of discouragement. They've had property seized from them. Some of them have been put into prison, and they're being made fun of and persecuted by their neighbors. And while none of them have died yet, they're very discouraged. And so the author is trying to encourage them to remain faithful and to persevere. And in chapter 12, starting in verses 1, He says, "Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which is so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who endured such hostility against sinners, against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls." And so what is it that this encouraging passage from Hebrews, what is it that it's trying to tell us that will help us to endure and persevere in life and in our walk with Christ? And I think the message is this, the message that I want us to come away with, is that we need to focus on Christ at the finish line so that from him we will receive the endurance that we need for the race. So we have to focus on Christ at the finish line to endure, to receive that endurance from him as a gift. And so we're going to look at three things. One is we're going to look at the need to run with endurance. We're going to need to also look at removing every weight that is encumbering us. And we also need to recall Jesus' example that he has set for us of endurance on the cross. And so running with endurance. Now, how many of you like to run? I'm going to guess most people are not going to raise their hands in this audience. Yeah, I see Victoria. Yeah, I think one time Victoria has told me, she said, if you ever see me running, you better run too, because there's a bear behind me or something chasing me, right? So yeah, I think I've heard other people say that oftentimes. You know, I have a love-hate relationship with running myself, but the reason most people don't like it is because it hurts. It's painful. It's not that fun to do. But earlier this year, I had gotten to some of the best running shape in my life, but then I took a break from it, and I tried to get back into it. And so I headed out one morning after this break from running, and I tried to go on a run. And I live at the bottom of a hill, so either way, when I start a run, I have to go up a hill first thing. And I remember I made it to the top of that hill, and I said that morning, yeah, I'm going to turn back. My legs hurt too much. My lungs are on fire. I'm not going to do this today. And I headed back down that hill, right? So it was because I didn't have endurance at that time. I lost it. And many times in life, it's the same way. Whenever things feel very uncomfortable, we try to ease up, and we might not stick with something that we said we were going to stick with. And I think all of us have had that at some point in our lives where we tried to commit to something but ended up giving up because it got too hard. And I'm definitely a person who's had that happen to them multiple times in life. And but the Christian life is the same way. How often have you how often do you grow discouraged because of something that happened at work, at school, or maybe it's a relationship is strained in your life. Maybe you have faced health complications and you're in pain, or maybe you know a loved one who's hurting and they're in the hospital right now. And so you're growing discouraged with life, and life is just hard. It's throwing you curveballs. It's not easy. And so it's really hard to keep Christ and God at the forefront of your mind sometimes whenever we can make things a little bit easier for our minds if we do something else. If we, you're saying, I'm too busy to go to church. I'm too busy to do all to be with Christians right now because I've got a lot of stress going on in my job. Or it could be that you're distracted because you're wanting to distract yourself with all these things so that you can cope with all the stress and all the hardships that you're going with in life. And so you lack endurance in those areas. So what is the secret? How do we endure in those times? It's really simple, at least to say, or to put on paper. And it's that you just need to keep going. And I know that seems overly simple, but it's true. If I had decided that morning that I decided to set out and to run, that I was like, even though I got to the top of the hill and my legs felt like jello, if I said I'm going to keep on putting one foot in front of the other, I would have completed that run for the day instead of giving up and turning back. And so that's what we sometimes have to do in life, is put one foot in front of the other when things are hard and difficult. But another thing is that we need to pray to God and ask Him for endurance. Ask Him to give that to us. Because it says in the Bible that He will do that for us. That if we ask Him for us, if we rely upon Him, wait upon Him, hope in Him, He is going to provide us with the endurance we need. And that one of the best passages that talks about that is Isaiah 40, verses 27 through 31. He says, "And why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my just claim is passed over by God? Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. He is his understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the weak, and to those who have no might, He increases strength. Even the youths shall faint and be weary. Even young men will utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." So we need to make sure that we are waiting upon the Lord and we are hoping in Him and praying to Him for strength whenever our own fails. So we need to run with endurance. Second is we need to remove every weight. And that's what the author of Hebrews says in Hebrews 12, verse 1, right? He says, removing every weight and every sin that easily ensnares us. And a lot of the times when we read this, we think we need to get rid of sin in our lives. And that's true. We do need to get rid of sin. Those are the things that really encumber us. But there's things that aren't sinful in themselves that weigh us down, right? So Carter, whenever you're playing football, does your coach tell you, it's game time, put on your ankle weights, right? No, he doesn't say that. He doesn't say put on your ankle weights whenever you go out there. He doesn't want you to have your mouth full of candy when you're out there on the football field. So you're whenever you're in a sport or you're in a competition, if you're in the Olympics, say, running a marathon, you're not going to do that with a cell phone in your pocket and a full, three-piece suit or whatever. You're going to try to get there as efficiently as possible, even though having those other things aren't going to disqualify you from the race, technically speaking. And so we need to do the same thing in the Christian life. We don't need to go around the Christian life with ankle weights on. We need to make sure that we are getting rid of these things in our lives that are hindering us from truly running this race so that we can do it more effectively. Some of these things can be, again, innocent and are fine in moderation. But how distracted can we become whenever we try to pursue wealth to great lengths? Because we're so concerned about money and so concerned about acquiring things. Sometimes it can be just our cell phones or our TVs or our radios, whatever it might be, that we are using all these things constantly to distract us, and instead of going and doing what God asks us to do. And again, as I said, these things are not bad in and of themselves and in moderation, but we need to make sure that we are not letting these things encumber us, that we're not letting these things weigh us down on our race. As I can say that sometimes your cell phone can get distracting, and I could spend that time better, serving other people or studying my Bible or deriving encouragement from God's Word, because life is hard and I need that encouragement. I don't need to be sitting, scrolling through my phone for an hour on end and, getting further discouraged and further ruining my concentration on what's important. And so we need to make sure that we do this in the Christian life. And we'll talk more about that in some specific ways we need to do that. But for now, we need to make sure we are not running this race. We need to remove every weight whenever we're doing that. And then third, finally, we need to recall Jesus' example on the cross and His endurance. And that's what the author of Hebrews says, right? And then in chapter 3, he says, consider Jesus. But then in verse 3 of chapter 12, he says, consider Him who endured such hostility from sinners against Himself, lest you also become weary in your souls. And what that means is, think about Jesus and what He endured in order that you also can endure like He did. you're going to grow discouraged if you don't do that. And so what are some things that we can think about whenever we think about Jesus' example and what he did on the cross and how he endured? One, we just see that he endured. We see how he persevered through that pain, through that discomfort, through that shame, and we are also called to do that same thing. Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me and to follow me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. So if we're going to follow Jesus' example, if we're going to take up our cross and follow him, we need to consider all the pain and the sorrow, the suffering that he went through, and realize we're going to have to accept that for ourselves and learn how to endure from him. So besides the fact that he just endured, we also need to think about how he did it for the joy that was set before him, as it says in verse 2. He had this joy, this thing to look forward to that helped him persevere through it. How many times whenever you've had hard times in life or discouragement in life, you thought about why it's all worth it in the end? And it's oftentimes looking forward to those things, looking forward to the finish line, looking forward to the victory that you're going to get, the accomplishment that you're going to achieve once you persevere through this. That's what's going to help sustain you through that hard time. And it's true even for the Christian. Because we have so many promises by God, inalterable promises, things that are guaranteed for us if we persevere through these things. We need to remember those things, constantly remind ourselves of those joys, those things that help us to get through those. We need to remember our why. Remember what makes enduring this worth it. So we need to remember the joy that's set before us. And third, he says that Jesus despised the shame. He was despising the shame. Whenever we think about the crucifixion that Jesus faced, we think about the physical pain that he suffered on that cross and in the beatings preceding that. We think about how visceral, how hard that must have been from a physical standpoint. But we often underemphasize the social or the impact or the shame that he suffered. Jesus, he didn't have a towel around his waist like we see in pictures. He would have been hung up there completely naked in front of everyone to see that passes into the city. He would have been completely humiliated by everybody, mocking him, spitting on him. And so he was completely put to shame. And the Romans wanted to do that so that no one would want to follow this guy. No one was going to want to be his follower, because they did that to all the criminals and the rebels so that no one would follow in their footsteps. And so we also need to realize that we're going to have to take that shame upon ourselves. That as Christians, people are going to make fun of us. They're not going to understand us. And so we're going to have to be like Jesus, and we're going to have to despise the shame. And what that means is we have to be like, I don't care about your insults that you give me. Your insults don't matter to me anymore at this point. He said we need to, and even if they do hurt a little bit, we just keep going through realizing that these people don't understand why we're doing what we're doing. And so we need to despise the shame that the world tries to put upon us. And whenever they make fun of us for being a goody two-shoes, or whenever they say that we're completely ignorant of modern issues, while we do need to try to understand people and try to love people, we need to also realize we're able to disagree with them at the same time. And so these are some ways we need to consider Jesus' example of endurance. We need to also think, how are we going to implement these practices? Now, we're going to talk about 4 things. And now that we've talked about these 3 points of how we should run with endurance, we need to remove every weight, and we should recall Jesus' example. Now we're going to look at some applications. There's going to be 4 of them. The first one is that we need to make a list of the weights of our various lives. We need to think about these things and how we can cast off these weights. So whenever you're making this list, you have to go through your day, your week, or your month and think about the things that you can do on a daily basis or habitually do. And I want you to ask 2 questions about them. each of these things or activities that you do. One is that you need to think, is this helping me in my relationship with Christ? Is it helping me draw nearer to Jesus? Helping me be a Christian? The second question is, if I cut this thing completely out of my life, would I have more time, more attention, more energy to devote to being God's servant? And those are two very hard questions to ask. And there are definitely going to have certain things on that list that are going to check those boxes as this thing is not helping me draw near to Christ, and it's also distracting me. It's a weight I need to get rid of. And so what I want you to do is after you go through that, just work on the top one or two on that list throughout the week. Think, how can I cast off this weight this week? How can I make sure I run this race with endurance so that these things aren't hindering me? They aren't like ankle weights while I'm trying to run a race. So that's the first thing. Make a list of the things you need to do. Second is that you need to figure out how to habitually recall Jesus' example of endurance. And the author says, remember and recall Jesus' example, lest you become weary. And we can recall this right now as we're talking, but it's more important that we remember these things throughout the week whenever things are really hard. You know, we're here, we can be encouraged, we can talk to one another about Jesus, but when you're at work and your boss is yelling at you, getting on your back, or your coworkers are making fun of you, that's when it's going to be really hard to want to endure in those times. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to remind yourself? And then there's various ways you can do this. You can have, you can do what some people do, have post-it notes of verses or your why you are going to continue to endure. But other people, maybe you want to have another visual reminder, like a picture of Jesus on the cross, or some other picture that reminds you of your purpose, of why you want to endure. And so I encourage you, do something to help you think about Jesus throughout the week, throughout your day. Not just say, I'm going to do it and never really changing anything. It could be as easy as putting reminders on your phone, on your calendars, on your refrigerator, on your bathroom mirror. Whatever it may be that helps you, try to do that. Because the more you think about Jesus and recall his example, the more likely you are to get through those hard times. The third thing that we can do is we need to find encouragement in the scriptures and in God's promises. As I said, Jesus endured for the joy that was set before him. And we need to remember those reasons why we are doing what we are doing, why we started this race, this journey in the first place. And it might be from one of my favorite Psalms to go to, or verses to go to right now, is Psalm 16, where it talks about how the Lord God is my portion. He is my blessing, my inheritance. And how at the very last verse it says that God, at his right hand, are pleasures forever, our enjoyments, our delights. And it shows how true satisfaction comes through God. I don't need all these distractions for a truly satisfying life. That's one of the promises and the things that helps me get through the week. And I'm sure there are verses for you, and I hope that you all will share them with one another. What helps you? What verses have been most helpful to you in helping you endure? And if not, you can go through your Bibles, you can go through old lessons, you can go through even on the internet and look up encouraging verses that'll help you get through the week. And that will hopefully help you remember God's promises and what great riches we have in Jesus. And finally, the fourth thing is that we need to encourage one another to endure. It's hard to run or to do any sort of discipline by yourself. You can have, I don't know of many people that are able to, without any help or any training help or any partners, able to compete in the Olympics. All of them have a team. They have a coach. They have people helping them, cheering them on whenever things get hard. We need that as well as Christians, and that is why God has given us the church, given us one another. And I hope that throughout the week, you won't just encourage each other today, but you'll send cards to one another or text messages to one another, call one another or visit one another throughout the week. And that your visits and your calls, they aren't just going to be about the weather or about a ball game or about shopping or something, but it's going to be something encouraging, something intentional to help you in your faith with Jesus. So what is it that is hindering you from running this race for Jesus? What is it that's holding you back? I want you to think about that throughout the week and to try to make sure that you are not making things harder on yourself than they have to be. What Jesus calls us to is that we do need to take up our cross and follow Him. The author of Hebrews also says essentially the same thing in that next chapter, in chapter 13. He says in verse 12, he says, "Therefore Jesus also, that He might sanctify the people with His own blood, suffered outside the gate." That is, He was crucified outside the city gate of Jerusalem. "Therefore let us go forth to Him outside the camp, bearing His reproach." That is, despising the shame. For here, on this earth, we have no continuing city. We have no enduring city, but we seek the one that is to come. We need to realize where we belong. We belong outside in the camp where Jesus bore His reproach, bore His shame. We need to be there with them and not identify so much with this world and its way of doing things. So I encourage you today, if there is anyone who is not a Christian and you want to become a Christian today, I encourage you to do so. To start this race, start your journey, because it's truly life-changing. But if you're already a Christian and you lack endurance, and you're struggling and you want help, you want prayers and encouragement, we are glad to do so and help you today. So if there are any needs this morning, please come as we stand and sing.